The darkness of deep space shimmered with an unexpected brilliance. Massive ships materialized from nothingness, their hulls gleaming like polished obsidian against the endless black void. Captain Jae-sung Park stood motionless, his hands clasped behind his back, watching the quantum fold stabilize as hundreds of vessels emerged in perfect synchronization. The bridge of the flagship horizon hummed with quiet intensity. Holographic displays flickered around Park, showing multiple layers of spatial data, energy readings, and complex navigational trajectories. His crew moved with practiced precision, each movement calculated and smooth. No one spoke. The tension was palpable. These were not ordinary ships. Each vessel represented decades of human technological advancement, compressed into sleek, angular designs that defied traditional spacecraft engineering. They looked more like predators than machines. Sharp, dangerous, with lines that suggested speed and power beyond anything previously imagined. Aboard the lead Zorn Imperial Monitoring Station, Admiral Hyun Kim watched in growing disbelief. His communication systems erupted with a cascade of warning signals, each ping more urgent than the last. Unknown energy signatures flooded their long-range sensors, creating a kaleidoscope of data that made no immediate sense. "Impossible," Kim muttered, his weathered fingers dancing across holographic control panels. The readings were unlike anything in the vast databases of the Zorn Imperium. These ships were generating energy signatures that seemed to break fundamental rules of known physics. The quantum fold continued to stabilize, revealing more of the human fleet. Hundreds of ships, no, hundreds of perfectly aligned vessels, now occupied a region of space that moments ago had been completely empty. Their formation was mathematically precise, suggesting a level of coordination that bordered on the supernatural. Captain Park allowed himself the smallest of smiles. Years of preparation, decades of secret technological development, and generations of careful planning were about to bear fruit. Humanity was about to make its grand entrance onto the galactic stage. The Zorn monitoring systems continued to go crazy. Sensor arrays that had been designed to track the most sophisticated known spacecraft were struggling to process the information streaming in. Energy readings fluctuated wildly. Spatial distortions continued to ripple outward from the fleet's emergence point. "Quantum stabilization complete," a calm female voice announced from the horizon's navigation systems. "All ships report optimal positioning." Park nodded almost imperceptibly. Every ship knew exactly where it needed to be. Every system was synchronized. This was not just a fleet. This was a perfectly orchestrated machine of unprecedented capability. On the Zorn monitoring station, Admiral Kim began to realize the magnitude of what he was witnessing. This was not a random occurrence. This was a calculated, deliberate entrance. Whoever these beings were, they wanted to be noticed. They wanted to make a statement. The human ships continued to hang in space, their designs a stark contrast to the more organic, crystalline structures of Zorn spacecraft. Where Zorn ships curved and flowed, these human vessels were angular, sharp with lines that suggested speed, power, and an almost predatory intelligence. Subtle energy pulses began emanating from the fleet, not weapons, but some form of communication. Complex mathematical sequences, spatial coordinates, and what seemed like deliberate technological handshakes rippled across the communication spectrums. Admiral Kim realized something critical. These ships were not just announcing their presence. They were systematically probing, testing, and potentially establishing communication protocols that the Zorn had never encountered. Captain Park watched the external displays, knowing exactly what was happening. Every movement, every energy pulse was carefully planned. Humanity was not just arriving. They were strategically introducing themselves to a galactic civilization that had no idea they were coming. The quantum fold continued to shimmer at the edge of the monitored space, suggesting that more could emerge at any moment. The hundreds of ships already present were merely the beginning, a promise of what was to come. In that moment, hanging between absolute stillness and potential chaos, the galaxy changed forever. The Zorn Imperium's most secure territorial boundaries had been crossed without a single shot fired. No weapons deployed. Just a pure, calculated demonstration of technological superiority. Captain Jae-sung Park remained perfectly still, watching, waiting. The real conversation was about to begin. The silence of space crackled with tension as the first Zorn diplomatic vessels approached the human fleet. Their massive crystalline ships moved slowly, each movement calculated and cautious. The human vessels looked small by comparison, but there was something about their design that suggested deadly precision, like a collection of razor-sharp blades waiting to strike. Sung Min Lee sat at the communication console, her fingers hovering just above the transmission controls. Every word would matter. Every syllable was a potential weapon or bridge between two civilizations that had never before encountered each other. The Zorn vessels were beautiful in their own way, massive structures that looked more like growing crystals than manufactured ships. They reflected starlight in complex patterns, their surfaces shifting and changing with subtle energy flows. But next to the human fleet, they suddenly looked fragile, vulnerable. Attention unknown fleet. Came the first Zorn communication. The voice was translated through multiple linguistic algorithms, carrying a tone that mixed curiosity with barely concealed fear. Please identify yourselves and state your purpose in this sector. Sung Min Lee took a deep breath. This was the moment they had prepared for during years of secret planning. We represent the United Earth Expeditionary Force. Her transmission began, each word selected with surgical precision. We come with respect, but also with clear intentions of establishing our presence in this galactic sector. The message was simple, but its implications were profound. Aboard the primary Zorn command vessel, senior diplomatic officers listened and re-listened to the transmission. Their translation systems worked overtime, analyzing not just the words, but the subtle undertones, the technological complexity of the transmission itself. This was no ordinary first contact. The human transmission carried an inherent confidence that was impossible to ignore. It wasn't a request for permission. It was a statement of arrival, of presence, of power. On the Zorn flagship, Admiral Krell studied the holographic displays showing the human fleet. Each ship seemed to pulse with an inner energy, a technological sophistication that made their own vessels look almost primitive by comparison. The human ships weren't just present. They seemed to be breathing, thinking, waiting. Run another scan, Krell ordered his technical team. I want to know everything about these vessels. The scanners worked frantically, sending out complex energy probes. But the human ships seemed to absorb these scans, reflecting back only what they wanted the Zorn to see. It was like trying to examine a ghost, always just beyond complete understanding. Sung Min Lee watched the Zorn responses with careful concentration. Each moment of silence was a negotiation. Each second of delay was a form of communication. The humans were demonstrating that they were not afraid, that they were in complete control of this encounter. The Zorn leadership, watching from their central command stations, began to realize something profound. This was no primitive species stumbling into galactic politics. This was a civilization that had studied, prepared, and chosen this exact moment for their arrival. More communications began to flow. The Zorn asked questions, requested clarifications, attempted to understand the scale and intention of this sudden appearance. The human responses were always precise, always calm, never revealing more than necessary, but always suggesting vast reserves of knowledge and capability just beneath the surface. It was like watching a complex dance, each movement calculated, each gesture meaningful. The Zorn leadership trembled, not from fear, though there was certainly an element of that, but from the sudden understanding that everything they knew about the galaxy had just changed. This was no ordinary first contact. This was the arrival of something entirely new, something that would reshape everything. Sung Min Lee allowed herself the smallest of smiles. Phase 1 was complete. The introduction had been made, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Unji Kang's fingers moved with surgical precision across the holographic interface. Her eyes, sharp and focused, scanned impossible streams of data that flickered and danced across multiple screens. This was more than just observation. This was a systematic dissection of technology that seemed to belong to another universe entirely. The human ships sat quietly in space, looking deceptively simple, but every scan revealed layers of complexity that made Zorn technology look like children's toys. Each pass of the scanner uncovered something more incredible than the last. "We appreciate the opportunity to discuss our mutual interests," Han said, his voice calm and measured. But everyone in the room understood the underlying message. This wasn't a negotiation between equals. This was a conversation where humans were setting the terms. The Zorn Imperial Council representatives exchanged nervous glances. Their most advanced diplomatic teams had been preparing for potential first contact scenarios for generations, but nothing had prepared them for this moment. Han presented a series of data projections, star charts, resource maps, technological exchange proposals. Each document was crafted with surgical precision. The proposals seemed reasonable on the surface, but underneath, they contained layers of strategic complexity that left the Zorn diplomats struggling to understand the full implications. "We are proposing a collaborative framework," Han explained. But the word collaborative felt more like a polite suggestion than an actual invitation. His tone suggested that collaboration wasn't optional, it was inevitable. The lead Zorn diplomat, Elder Kresnik, tried to assert some control. "And what precisely are your motivations?" he asked, hoping to find some weakness in the human strategy. Han's slight smile was all the answer needed. No direct response. Just a look that suggested the humans were playing a game far more complex than the Zorn could comprehend. Resource discussions became a subtle battlefield. The humans weren't demanding. They were suggesting. Each suggestion carried the weight of technological superiority that made outright refusal impossible. Rare mineral rights, research collaboration, trade road access, everything was on the table. But the true game was happening between the lines. The Zorn realized the humans weren't just negotiating. They were demonstrating. Every interaction was a subtle showcase of technological and strategic superiority. Their ships, their communication systems, their apparent ability to appear anywhere, anytime. Han never raised his voice, never made direct threats, but the implicit message was clear. Resistance was not just futile. It was laughable. Peripheral diplomatic teams watched in fascination. Other galactic civilizations monitored these negotiations like a complex chess match. The humans moved with a confidence that suggested they had already calculated every possible outcome. Resource allocation discussions became particularly interesting. The humans didn't demand exclusive rights. They suggested shared frameworks that somehow always seemed to benefit them more. Subtle, intelligent, impossible to directly challenge. "We believe in mutual growth," Han would say. And somehow, that statement would contain layers of meaning that left the Zorn diplomats mentally exhausted. The technology exchange proposals were particularly cunning. The humans offered advanced scientific insights, but each offer was designed in a way that would gradually reshape Zorn technological understanding. Not a direct transfer, a systematic reconstruction. Elder Kresnik began to understand. The humans weren't just negotiating. They were fundamentally restructuring the existing galactic power dynamics, and they were doing it with such elegance that resistance seemed not just impossible, but ridiculous. What did the humans want? That remained the most frustrating question. They didn't seek territorial expansion. They didn't demand tribute. Their proposals seemed almost educational, as if they were preparing something much larger. The negotiations continued. Hours became days. The Zorn Imperial Council found themselves increasingly cornered, unable to find any strategic advantage. The humans wanted something, but exactly what remained maddeningly unclear. And that uncertainty was perhaps the most terrifying strategy of all. The stars watched silently as tension built between the human fleet and Zorn patrol squadrons. Space seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something to break. The Zorn patrol commander, Captain Vrex, believed a simple probe would reveal human weaknesses. His squadron of 12 advanced warships moved into position, sensor arrays scanning the human fleet's outer perimeter. Each ship carried sophisticated scanning equipment, designed to test defensive capabilities without direct confrontation. They were wrong. Quantum entanglement drives were the first major shock. Traditional spacecraft moved through space using predictable energy consumption and propulsion methods. These human ships seemed to exist in multiple locations simultaneously, bending the very fabric of spatial understanding. They didn't just travel through space, they negotiated with space itself. The ship's hull was another marvel. Adaptive nanomaterial that could literally reshape itself in milliseconds. Damage detection and repair happened faster than the human eye could track. A small meteor strike that would destroy a traditional spacecraft would be absorbed and reconstructed by these incredible materials. Impossible, Kang muttered, her professional demeanor barely concealing her excitement. Years of intelligence training had prepared her for unexpected discoveries, but nothing could have prepared her for this. Weapon systems defied all known military engineering principles. Where traditional spacecraft relied on energy weapons or physical projectiles, these human ships could apparently neutralize entire battle groups with a single synchronized energy pulse, not through brute force, but through an almost mathematical precision that suggested intelligence beyond conventional understanding. The Zorn technical teams worked frantically, their most advanced scanning equipment pushed to absolute limits. Each scan returned more questions than answers. The human technology didn't just push boundaries. It completely rewrote the rules of what was considered possible. Power generation was another breakthrough. Traditional spacecraft required massive energy systems with complex cooling mechanisms and fuel storage. These human ships generated energy through processes that seemed to extract power directly from quantum fluctuations. It was like watching someone create electricity from pure thought. Communication systems were equally mind-bending. Traditional interstellar communication relied on radio waves or laser transmissions. The human ships seemed to communicate through quantum entanglement, transmitting information instantaneously across potentially infinite distances. Defensive capabilities were equally stunning. Instead of traditional shield systems, these ships could apparently manipulate probability itself. Incoming attacks would simply fail, not because of energy barriers, but because the mathematical likelihood of a successful strike would become zero. Eun-Ji Kang realized something profound. This wasn't just advanced technology. This was a completely different understanding of physics, engineering, and potentially even reality itself. The Zorn technical teams began to understand something terrifying. They were looking at technology so advanced it was essentially indistinguishable from magic. Each revelation made their own technological achievements look like primitive cave drawings. Propulsion systems defied everything they knew about space travel. These ships didn't just move through space. They seemed to negotiate with space, folding and unfolding reality around them. Distance became a meaningless concept. Material science had been completely reimagined. Where traditional spacecraft used rigid materials, these ships used substances that could think, adapt, and respond. The line between technology and living organism became blurred. Energy management was another breakthrough. Traditional spacecraft lost massive amounts of energy through heat and inefficient systems. These human ships operated with such efficiency that energy loss was practically non-existent. They didn't just use energy. They seemed to have a symbiotic relationship with it. As hours passed, the Zorn teams compiled their initial reports. But every report felt inadequate. How do you describe technology that seems to break fundamental laws of physics? How do you explain something so advanced it makes your most sophisticated systems look like ancient mechanical calculators? Eun-Ji Kang knew one thing with absolute certainty. Human technology wasn't just advanced. It was revolutionary. It wasn't just a step forward. It was an entirely new understanding of what technology could be. The galaxy had just changed forever, and nobody was ready for what was coming next. The diplomatic chamber was a masterpiece of tension. Wu Jinhan sat at the center of the massive circular table, his posture relaxed, but his eyes razor-sharp. Around him, Zorn diplomats shifted uncomfortably, their crystalline skin reflecting the soft ambient light. Each word spoken was a weapon, each silence a strategy. The moment the Zorn ships crossed an invisible boundary, something changed. No alarms sounded, no warning signals transmitted. The human fleet simply responded. Invisible energy waves pulsed across space, complex mathematical frequencies that seemed to exist between reality and imagination. The Zorn ships didn't explode. They didn't burn. They simply stopped functioning. Propulsion systems went dark. Weapon controls became unresponsive. Communication arrays died simultaneously. 12 sophisticated warships became nothing more than floating metal objects in less than 7 minutes. Not a single human weapon fired. Not a single human ship moved. Captain Jae-sung Park watched the entire sequence from the Horizon's bridge. His expression remained calm, calculated. Each movement of the Zorn squadron had been anticipated, predicted, neutralized before it even began. Defensive Protocol Alpha 7 complete, a calm voice announced from the ship's computer system. The message was clear and simple. Humanity would not be challenged. Humanity would not be threatened. On the Zorn command station, Admiral Hyun Kim watched the sensor data in absolute shock. 12 advanced warships, each representing decades of technological development, had been completely disabled without a single offensive action. The human response wasn't destruction. It was a demonstration, a message written in the language of pure technological superiority. Zorn communication channels erupted in confused chatter. Military commanders demanded explanations. Political leaders sought immediate briefings. But the fundamental truth was simple. Something had fundamentally changed in the galactic power structure. Captain Park continued to watch the disabled Zorn squadron. No lives had been lost. No physical damage sustained. Just a complete and total neutralization of technological capabilities. Return the squadron's crew's emergency life support. Park quietly instructed his tactical team. Prepare standard rescue protocols. Even in demonstration of power, humanity showed a level of calculated mercy. The disabled Zorn ships drifted silently. Their crews would be rescued. Their technology would be studied. But the message was sent. Humanity had arrived, and humanity would not be intimidated. Complex sensor readings continued to stream from the human fleet. Each pulse of energy, each subtle technological frequency suggested layers of capability far beyond current understanding. The Zorn were looking at technology so advanced it bordered on the magical. No weapons had been fired, no direct threats made, just a simple, surgical demonstration of absolute technological control. Captain Park allowed himself a slight smile. The first real message had been sent, and the galaxy would never be the same. Conflict remained optional, but humanity's capabilities were now absolutely clear. The turning point had arrived, and nobody was prepared for what would come next. The negotiation chamber felt like a battlefield, but the weapons were words, and the combat was intellectual. Sung Min Lee sat at the center of a massive circular table, her presence radiating a quiet confidence that made the Zorn diplomats shift uncomfortably in their seats. This was no ordinary diplomatic meeting. This was a complete restructuring of galactic power dynamics. Lee's presentation began with holographic displays that seemed to dance with living information. Star charts, resource maps, and complex economic models appeared and transformed with each gesture of her hand. The Zorn diplomats watched, mesmerized, and terrified. "We propose a new framework of galactic cooperation," Lee started, her voice calm and measured. But everyone in the room understood the underlying message. This wasn't a proposal. This was a new set of rules. Trade agreements came first, But these were unlike any previous interstellar economic partnerships. The humans weren't asking for traditional resource exchanges. They were suggesting a complete reimagining of economic interactions. Technological exchange proposals were particularly stunning. The humans offered insights that could revolutionize entire scientific fields. But each offer was carefully constructed, a gift that would fundamentally reshape Zorn technological understanding. Elder Kresnik, the lead Zorn diplomat, tried to interrupt. "These terms are unprecedented," he stammered. Lee's smile was both polite and devastating. "Unprecedented times require unprecedented approaches," she responded. Strategic alignments were even more complex. The humans weren't seeking traditional military alliances. They were proposing a new model of galactic cooperation that made previous diplomatic frameworks look like children's games. The proposals touched every aspect of galactic civilization: resource management, scientific research, cultural exchange. Each point was crafted with such intricate intelligence that the Zorn diplomats struggled to fully comprehend the implications. Communication systems would be redesigned, research facilities would be restructured, trade routes would be completely reimagined. The humans weren't just suggesting changes. They were presenting a complete blueprint for a new galactic order. "We are not asking for permission," Lee said at one point. The statement hung in the air like a thundercloud. "We are defining new possibilities." The Zorn delegation realized something profound. This wasn't a negotiation between two equal powers. This was a tutorial, a lesson in what was possible when technological superiority met strategic intelligence. Each proposal carried multiple layers of meaning. What seemed like a simple trade agreement contained complex provisions that would reshape entire economic systems. What looked like a research collaboration was actually a systematic method of technological transfer. The humans weren't conquerors. They were architects of a new galactic civilization. Hours passed. The holographic displays continued to shift and change. Complex mathematical models demonstrated potential outcomes with terrifying precision. The Zorn diplomats found themselves not fighting the proposals, but struggling to understand them. Sung Min Lee remained calm throughout. Each question was answered with another question. Each challenge met with a demonstration of technological or strategic superiority. The message was clear. Humanity had arrived, and humanity was ready to reshape everything. Strategic alignments were proposed that would fundamentally change existing power structures. Some galactic civilizations would gain unprecedented opportunities. Others would need to completely reimagine their place in the universe. As the negotiations continued, one thing became absolutely clear. Humanity wasn't asking for permission anymore. They were defining new rules. And the galaxy would never be the same again. The galaxy trembled. Not with violence, not with destruction, but with the profound understanding that everything was about to change. Stellar maps transformed overnight. Diplomatic channels that had existed for thousands of years were suddenly redesigned, rewritten, completely reimagined. The arrival of the human fleet was more than an event. It was a fundamental transformation of galactic civilization. The Zorn Imperium faced a simple choice: adapt or become obsolete. Research stations across multiple star systems began receiving unprecedented technological packages, not just data, not just information, but complete scientific frameworks that would revolutionize understanding of physics, engineering, and biological sciences. Captain Jae-sung Park watched from the bridge of the horizon. Each movement of human ships suggested a larger strategy. This wasn't just a military arrival. This was a systematic restructuring of galactic potential. Diplomatic teams worked around the clock. New treaties emerged. Complex agreements that balanced technological exchange with strategic cooperation. The humans weren't conquerors. They were architects of a new future. Other galactic civilizations watched carefully, some with fear, some with excitement, but everyone understood one fundamental truth: nothing would remain the same. The human technological packages were like keys that could unlock potential that previous civilizations hadn't even imagined. Quantum communication systems, energy generation technologies, medical breakthroughs that could transform entire species' understanding of life itself. Wu Jinhan, the lead diplomatic strategist, explained it simply during one critical meeting. "We're not here to replace, we're here to elevate." Those words carried more weight than entire libraries of previous diplomatic documents. Resource management changed. Trade routes were redesigned. Scientific research was completely restructured. The humans brought a level of systematic thinking that made previous galactic cooperation look primitive. Military strategies were quietly transformed, not through direct conflict, but through technological demonstrations that made traditional weapons look like children's toys. The human fleet didn't need to fight. Its very existence was a statement of capability. The Zorn Imperium's leadership understood they were at a critical moment. They could resist and become historical footnotes, or they could embrace this new paradigm and become part of something extraordinary. Most chose adaptation. Research centers began integrating human technological frameworks. Diplomatic teams studied the new communication models. Military strategists analyzed the defensive capabilities demonstrated during the initial encounters. Captain Park continued to watch. Each movement of the human fleet suggested a larger plan, a strategy that extended far beyond current understanding. Yun Jikang's intelligence reports revealed layers of complexity. The humans weren't just offering technology. They were presenting a complete philosophical approach to civilization's development, a method of thinking that was both revolutionary and surprisingly collaborative. Sung Nin Lee's diplomatic strategies became case studies in multiple star systems: how to transform potential conflict into opportunity, how to present superior capability without threatening destruction. The galaxy was changing, not through war, not through conquest, but through an almost elegant restructuring of potential. Weeks turned into months. The initial shock transformed into cautious excitement. Civilizations that had been isolated for millennia suddenly found themselves connected through human-designed communication networks. Scientific breakthroughs appeared almost weekly. Medical technologies that could extend life. Energy systems that could transform entire planetary economies. Communication methods that made previous technologies look like primitive smoke signals. And through it all, Captain Jae-sung Park maintained his calm demeanor, watching, waiting. Looking out into the infinite expanse of stars, a slight smile crossed his face. This was merely the beginning. Humanity had arrived.